Having a little trouble with the recording, but I'll keep it going. It's on YouTube. All right. Well, good afternoon. Welcome to A Global Perspective, Sense of Belonging in the First Year Experience. We are so glad to have each and every one of you joining us, both in the live Zoom room as well as those who will watch on the live stream powered through YouTube. I'm Terrell Strayhorn, President and CEO of Do Good Work, also serve as Professor of Education and Psychology, Director of Research at Virginia Union University, and delighted to co-moderate today's conversation with Jaquin Johnson. I'll let Jaquin introduce himself and then we'll get started.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight or today, wherever you are in the world. I'm Jaquin Johnson, Director of Engagement and Outreach at Do Good Work, also a PhD student at the University of Cumberland.
And what we've planned for this webinar, whoa, see, that's me. You can't actually go to the live stream if you're going to live stream. So that's why you hear it twice. But what we've planned for this webinar is we have a distinguished set of guests who will share their perspectives on sense of belonging in the first year experience through their research and their professional practice. And we have a period of time that will be dedicated both to prepared remarks from our sort of discussant and the framer of the conversation. Then will be followed by a moderated panel with our panelists. And then we will have time reserved toward the end for some Q&A, but feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to raise questions and or the chat, which I know needs to be activated. There you go. And so feel free to use the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from, as well as to park comments and questions. We will have plenty of time for all of this. If you are a person who's aided by the assistance of closed captions, go to the bottom of your Zoom screen. You should see show captions. If you click that, activate it in your language that you prefer. It will show at the bottom of the screen. And again, we are live streaming this webinar. So for colleagues who can't join us, given the time difference across the globe, feel free to send them the YouTube link from Do Good Works YouTube page. Without further ado, I want to get us started with introducing our panelists as well as our framer of today's conversation. We have with us Dr. Joey Kitchen. Joey serves as an associate research professor at the University of Southern California's Pullias Center for Higher Education. Dr. Kitchen conducts quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods research, and his research agenda spans several areas, with a central focus on the role of college transition, outreach, and support programs and interventions in promoting equitable outcomes and college success among first-generation, low-income, racially minoritized students. He's committed to translating his research to inform policies and practices that promote social justice and equity in education. We are also joined by Claudia Rivera Munez, who is an early career researcher in higher education. In 2024, Dr. Claudia co-led a research project focusing on first-year students' involvement at the University of Melbourne Center for the Study of Higher Education at the University of Melbourne. Her research on the university experience focuses on the first-year undergraduate context, including topics like belonging, teacher-student interactions, and well-being. Jaquin will introduce the other two speakers.
Next, we have Dr. Chinaza. He is a educationist, researcher, and currently an associate professor in the Department of Education, Leadership, and Management at University of Johannesburg in South Africa. As a researcher, Chinaza holds collaboration in high regards. This has led him to collaborate with scholars from different fields of endeavor within and outside South Africa, as well as the continent. One of his collaborations has led to the successful completion of a global research project involving 62 countries from 6 continents of the world. His primary research area includes educational leadership for sustainable change and empowerment in disadvantaged communities. Chinaza has published several research articles in journals accredited by the Department of Higher Education and Training. And last but not least, we have Liz Thomas, is a professor of higher education at the University of York. Liz has been researching student diversity, experiences, and equitable outcomes in higher education for over 25 years. She is committed to using research to improve policy, practice, and equity, including the What Works Student Retention and Success Program, which focused on building student engagement and belonging. In 23-24, Liz worked with a number of institutions to develop a whole provider approach to student success. In 24-25, she is working with the Technological Higher Education Association, Ireland, and higher education providers to explore whole provider and whole sector approaches to enabling commuter student engagement and success. She has written many reports, books, chapters, and articles on these topics.
And so this is our distinguished panel of speakers and guests. Thank you all for being here. We're going to kick off today's conversation with some framing remarks about sense of belonging, student success, and the first year experience from Professor Liz Thomas. Liz?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to say a few words at the beginning of this webinar. This is clearly a really important topic for students and higher education providers across the globe. So I thought I'd start by telling you a little bit about my research journey, which is quite a long journey, really. So my journey started, though, by exploring access to higher education for students from underrepresented groups, but it quickly moved on to considering retention and success, as clearly getting into higher education is not enough. So my first research study looked at students who persisted in HE, and the most striking finding was the way that students labelled peers as their new family. And it really indicated the kind of informal support that their friends offered throughout their higher education journey, as opposed to perhaps the more formal types of support that we tend to think of. Conversely, some students also spoke about feeling ignored and isolated, and things like eating their lunch alone, which made them think about leaving. And then this led on to a much bigger study, the What Works Student Retention and Success Program, which actually took place over about an 11-year period. And here we looked at and evaluated many interventions defined by different universities and colleges in the UK. And perhaps not surprisingly, the evaluations found that there was no silver bullet. There was no single intervention that solved student retention and completion challenges, but rather there were shared features of interventions and activities that were effective. But we also noticed in the qualitative work that the more successful interventions, the students talked about belonging and how their friends helped them to overcome their feelings of uncertainty and help them to solve the challenges that they experienced. We found that successful interventions were intentional, interactive, and relevant to students. This meant they had an explicit academic purpose, but they also nurtured a sense of belonging. So from this study, we understood that interventions that helped students to belong were effective at improving persistence. And we found that belonging seemed to be the outcome of things like supportive peer relationships, meaningful interaction with academic staff. Students, though, needed to have the confidence, knowledge, and skills to succeed academically, but they also had to believe that the course would equip them for a future role that was matched to their own ideas about their future self. This seems to suggest the importance of not only belonging now, but also being able to imagine yourself being a graduate and belonging beyond higher education as well. The What Works programme has been highly influential in the UK and even internationally. A particularly important feature of our work was shifting the focus from retention in general, and belonging in particular, away from the periphery and into the classroom. Many students from non-traditional and disadvantaged backgrounds tend to prioritise their academic attendance in taught sessions and engage far less in the co-curricular and extracurricular activities offered by many universities and colleges. And so we started to look at much more inclusive learning and teaching. Many people have gone on to do much more research around the relationship between student belonging and success, and there are many people with extensive knowledge on this topic. I just want to highlight a few of the things that I've been involved in now. So in the #IBelong project, which was funded by the Erasmus Plus European Union, we created a set of interventions to work with students, staff, and student mentors to develop belonging through the classroom. And here our focus was indeed on the first year experience. The student partners we work with devised engaging activities for new arrivals, which directly helped them to meet each other and get to know each other, and also provided opportunities for them to reflect on belonging and share some of their concerns at their start of their academic careers. However, the student partners also told us that they felt that this type of work needed to be extended into the second year. In short, they felt that they were looked after well during their first year of study, and suddenly they found themselves in the second year and on their own when their academic studies really started to count. One student memorably described it as being like a middle child, always overlooked. I followed this up with my own university at the time, and they confirmed that second year students were often attended to last in terms of the timetable for teaching, the offering of extracurricular activities, and the support, and generally how they were cared for. So I therefore urge you to think about belonging not just in the first year, but also how you extend belonging or the culture of caring throughout your student experience. Think, for example, about your postgraduate students. Our postgraduate taught students in the UK arrive from across the globe and have to very quickly get to grips with the new academic culture and to integrate socially and to feel like they belong. So do we do enough to ensure that our postgraduate taught students also have a sense of belonging that sustains them throughout a really challenging year? Another area that warrants attention is around the extent to which all students need to feel like they belong and what makes them belong. A recent PhD student and now Dr. David Galani, has investigated how we can help students to understand their own belonging needs and help students to purposefully meet their own belonging needs from the vast array of opportunities available within most universities. He used a workshop at the start of the academic year, and that proved to be a really effective mechanism to improve students' belonging and their continuation rates. Some of my current work is now looking at the non-residential commuter student who tend to prioritize their academic engagement over the wider engagement. And I'm really concerned that they're missing out on developing their graduate and civic skills and thus not gaining as much from their higher education experience as their peers. I'm also looking at the institutional responsibility and in particular the whole provider approach. What leadership, structure and processes, cultures and values and use of data and evidence do we need to have in place in order to deliver equity in higher education through an inclusive learning experience and not changing our students on other aspects of belonging and success in higher education? My esteemed colleagues have much to share in terms of evidence-based practice, but one thing I can assure you is that belonging is strongly associated with retention and success, and we can, as individuals and as organisations, intervene to improve student belonging and student outcomes. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Awesome. Bring everyone back. Thank you, Liz, for those wonderful and substantive, rich comments that really frame today's discussion. So, as Liz mentioned, our panelists have quite a bit to share from their research and scholarship about sense of belonging in the first year experience. And so, without further ado, we're going to the West Coast for our first question. And this goes to Dr. Kitchen. Tell us why the first year experience is so important.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first year is really a time of transition into what is for many students a completely different educational, social, academic, and even physical environment. There's different norms, expectations, ways of doing things that may feel really challenging for many students to adjust to in that first year. So everything's kind of in flux, and we know that without the right kind of support during that first year experience, students may naturally feel overwhelmed or like they can't be successful, even though they may innately, and they do innately have what it takes to succeed. They might just not have the right kind of college support that's really tailored to their social, academic, and their educational needs. And so it falls on the institution. It's the responsibility of the institutions to adjust accordingly to ensure that they have a meaningful and rewarding first year experience. Going through these adjustments and the challenges in the first year, and why that first year is so important, students may begin to question whether they even belong in college, if they're capable of succeeding in a post-secondary environment. and they may be even considering not coming back for the second year. And indeed, that pans out in the statistics. A large proportion of students do not return to college after the first year, and a large part of that can be attributed to what their first year experience was like and not having the right kind of support that first year. On the other hand, in that first year, we also know from research, some of which is my own, that having a successful transition and first year experience can really propel students to succeed, and that there are some really concrete things that institutions and educators can do to support a successful first year experience. So, for instance, one of the things that I have learned from my own research is that students who experience a student support culture that is consistently validating, that is affirming, and the interactions they have with staff, faculty, and administrators in that first year are very affirming and validating. They feel a greater sense of belonging, which, again, as mentioned earlier, is connected to their retention and long-term success. I've also learned, for example, that a first-year experience from my research, where courses, activities, and other experiences in that first year are coordinated and aligned by educators, where educators are proactive and reaching out to ensure students are getting their needs met and getting connections that they need to have to support their belonging, and where educators are in communication with each other about meeting students' multiple needs. That kind of first year experience contributes to students feeling like they matter, their success as an individual matters, and that they belong in college, which again is connected to their success. So we know what many of the challenges are in that first year, and we have some evidence-based solutions. And really, it's going to require the willpower on the part of the institution to create a bigger student support culture change at scale at the institution to promote belonging and success in that first year, I think.
Dr. Kitchen, I really appreciate your opening remarks to the question that Dr. Strayhorn posed, because as you said, that the transition is extremely hard for many students, especially first year, first in their family. And all the changes and overwhelmness can cause them to drop out. So building on what Dr. Kitchen offered us, from your research, Claudia, what aspects of the first year experience make a difference for students in your context?
Thank you. Well, the context that we have conducted research is Australia, and where most students commute to university. And particularly the university that I work with is a campus-based university. So most students come to university for the classes. So what happened in the classroom is very important. And our current research shows that students are not coming to campus as often as we would like. And that's something that also happened before pandemic, but that shows us how important it is when they are on campus for this particular context. So what we've seen is how important the classroom environment is, in particularly things that also Professor Liz mentioned, how the collaborative learning experiences with other students. For many students, the interactions with other peers and getting to know the classmates happens only in classrooms. And so this is very important, how teaching practices, strategies during classroom can provide this collaboration. But also something that Professor Joey mentioned is how the interactions with academic staff that happen there, how staff are perceived as approachable, available to respond questions to students. And so that also can help the students then listen to the feedback and provide them with their learning experiences. Of course, students come to university to learn, and this is the priority for this, what we're seeing in this particular university. So following to that, the learning experience is really important, especially very early on, how the content, the classroom content is related to students' interest. One of the main reasons for most students in Australia, even before the pandemic, and after the pandemic, to come to university is to study something that interests them. So how important is at the beginning to make that connection very clear, how the content and is relevant for them, and then for their careers later on. So early experiences in classrooms are very, very important. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much that you shared, Claudia, about the connections with peers, as well as connection with academic staff. And it's not just the mere connection, but it's the quality of that connection. So academic staff who are available, who are supportive, who help them see the connections between the content, the curriculum, their aspirations, and their future. And that happens in so many different ways. They come to school, to quote you, they come excited to learn, but they also come really excited about the connections and the relationships that they'll build there. Professor Chinaza, what would you add to the conversation at this point, that from your research, how is this the points of connection and maybe even some points of disconnection? You're still muted.
Thank you very much. I probably would have just continued talking like that. Thank you very much. And I want to appreciate the comments made by colleagues so far. I want to start by probably stating here that I've actually left the University of Johannesburg. I left South Africa last month, 28th of last month to be precise. So just in case of those who watch the video later on for noting anyway. All right, back to the discussion on ground. I totally agree with previous speakers that the issue of student belonging is critical. The issue of connection is very important, very important. As a matter of fact, where the connection is missing out or where there's a disconnect, students are likely not to do well. In fact, in our context, at some point, I should state that at some point we had the issue of students coming up with terminologies like high risk modules. You know, we had to coin something like the high risk modules, not because the modules were things that students must fail, but because over time they found out that students always really don't do well in such modules, and these are first year students. So you can imagine what the situation is. And I also found out that the issue of poor time management is a big thing in our own context, or in Africa, it's a big thing. Sometimes you find out that first year students, as though they are like individuals who have been waiting to leave the arms of their parents, and so as soon as they are let go to the university, it's like it's time for me to explore. So they just jump in, and so it becomes it can become a little bit messy at some point where they don't understand and are unable to manage their time. And that's one an issue with exposure, not being exposed to certain things. Yeah, for a few of them probably. Some of my research, anyway, I must also disclaim here, has been in the rural context of African universities. So when you talk about rural context, you know what it looks like sometimes. They don't have access to certain facilities. So when they become exposed to some of these things in their first year, it may become alarming at some point. So the issue of exposure, it's a big thing, or can be a big thing. And then when you talk about first generation students, if they are first generation students, then it becomes another issue. I mean, going to the university, being the first from the family to go to university, it can be a little bit problematic in the sense that there's nobody who's going ahead of them to guide them, to help them where necessary. So that's also another issue that I found out with my research. Then I talk about previous experience, their previous experiences, so secondary school experience, so where they have not been exposed to certain facilities from secondary school, and they just come to the university, like one of the speakers said, it can be overwhelming. It can be a little bit overwhelming at some point, and it becomes a little bit difficult or very difficult for them to handle. And at the end of the day, before they know it, 3 months gone down the line, and the first exam is already by the door knocking, and it becomes a difficult one for them to handle. Then issue with access to facilities where there are little or no facilities to enable or enhance their learning becomes a challenge. So these are some of the factors that, for me, based on my research, I found that are issues that have actually affected and keeps affecting many of the students, the first year students, especially those from the rural areas where some of these things are not readily available. But for those in the urban area where it is, for example, where there are facilities available, some of them don't struggle in this sense. Although I also take note and then emphasize the issue of the connection with staff members. And this time around, allow me to say not just lecturers. When you talk about staff members, you talk about academic and non-academic staff members. The ability to connect well with them really goes a long way to help them. For example, a lecturer won't help a student when it comes to registration. The lecturer is not responsible, rather, it's not responsible for the registration. So it's the registrar's office. So where the non-academic staff there is not forthcoming to assist the student, it becomes an issue, a challenge for that student. So allow me just add there that a connection with academic and non-academic staff is one big thing, a very big thing that students really hold dear. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know one of the last pieces you just shared was about context. So for those who are sort of taking notes or keeping up with the flow of conversation, it's not just differences by country, but even within countries, differences by region. And as Professor Chinaza just said, those who study and live in urban and rural connections. I know Jaquin's going to ask a question later about geography and how that really maps onto this conversation. But the point I want to pick out, which is going right back to you, Dr. Chinaza, is you talked about the power of these connections. And actually, toward the end of your comments, you shared that the connections between sort of academic and non-academic, academic, co-curricular, academic, student affairs, whatever we might call it in our geographical context, is so critical. And in my own work on belonging, I often say belonging is a feeling. And sometimes people get misled by that and think I'm talking about it's simply about hugs and handshakes, and it's not. Although, everybody wants a hug and everybody wants a handshake. It really has to do with the feeling that flows from seeing the connection between the curriculum and your career. It's the feeling that flows from the confidence of knowing you're able to do something because you just got elected to a student position, or because you feel the support of academic staff who are in your corner. It's a feeling that flows from studying hard and getting a better grade and being able to know that my efforts pay off and I'm treated fairly and equitably in this learning environment. So what I've learned is that that feeling can't be forced. It can't be fabricated, can't be faked. It has to be nurtured, facilitated, built, or conditioned. And we often facilitate and nurture, condition that feeling through our programs and services across the years, especially in the first year. So Professor Chinaza, and we'll go to others, tell us how we create sustainable conditions for first year students to feel a sense of belonging.
Okay, thank you very much. Allow me to give a practical example. I did mention something earlier when I talked about the issue of the high risk module. So students came up, or there was that terminology of high risk module, and it was a very serious issue in that particular university, considering the number of failures that was experienced. So one of the things that we did then was to come up with what we describe as a mentorship program. And this time around, going by research, it's obvious. Research has shown that students learn more from their peers. You and I may want to say that, students learn more from lecturers. True, they learn from lecturers, but I can tell you in reality or in practical sense that they learn more from their peers. So when a lecturer is there or whatever, so we came up with the idea of let's allow students to mentor students. So from second year to fourth year, we recruited people who could who volunteered to mentor those in the first year, and so we got them. We got some of them, those who we felt were qualified. So not just volunteered, but those who we felt were qualified based on their grades and some other things, criteria. We selected them, and they were trained, and they were assigned to certain number of students who were now their mentees. So first year students who were their mentees. And from there, it showed that some students did well. So from that model that we came up with, and where the issue was a bit tricky or tough, then for the council or whatever, then the case was referred to a more qualified person to assist the students. And that way we're able to track the students and help them grow. So I believe strongly, coming back to the issue of connecting with their peers, this time around, not just their peers on the same level, their co-first years, or maybe peers at the higher level, second year, third year, fourth year, who are able to help them, especially in the same modules that they are involved in. And then we can't overemphasize the issue of orientation, relevant workshops, seminars, webinars like this. We can't overemphasize their impact. For example, there's need for students to hear this again and again, that you're in the university does not mean you are free to do whatever you like. No, what it means, you should be able to manage your time. It means you have your life now to organize and order by yourself, not someone coercing or bossing you around. But in all of this, there is need to know that I need to take the bull by the horn, do what I need to do to get the good grades, and ask the right questions from the right persons, follow the right people. Sometimes it's like just when students come for the first time to university, sometimes as though they just when you take a fish throw into the ocean and the fish begins to swim here and there, not knowing what to do at any point in time. It looks like that sometimes. So the issue of the orientation becomes very critical, and our universities must. Yes, we do this in our universities. Sometimes the orientation is a whole week. Yes, but how many students attend this orientation? That's another big deal. So maybe there's need to also find ways of conscientizing students, even from secondary school, probably. That when you get to university, there's need to think about things like this, how to get yourself acclimatized, even from the first day in the university. And one of the best ways is attend orientation programs. Yes, the program is there, but students sometimes don't attend and they end up failing. And maybe by the time they get to their second year, they begin to regret, oh, if I had attended orientation, I probably would have been done a little bit more better and all that. So I'm trying to be careful not to take too much of the time. So it's the case of orientation, it's mentorship, it's seminar, it's webinar, it's another thing I want to emphasize here, maybe from the angle lecturers, is to encourage group work like we used to do. I know normally lecturers give group work and they allow one person come out, represent the group and speak. Even from secondary school, they do that. So one of the things I do personally when I give group work for to my students, I tell them from the word go that it's a group work, yes. However, a percentage of the group work will be the judgment for everybody, but then a percentage will be on individual basis. So what I do to ensure that everybody contributes, I can tell them, oh, when you're doing the presentation, at any point during the presentation, I can stop a speaker and call on any other speaker to continue from there. So everybody gets to know, oh, I can't just hide under the umbrella of, oh, she's representing the group. I can do whatever I like. And then, so at that point, I have noticed they all get enthused to ensure that they are part of what is happening in the group. And I think with that, I can say I have achieved success, not as much as I want, but at least to a large extent. Yeah.
Get ready, Jaquin. The ball is coming your way. But before we go there, Claudia, Joey, what would you add about the conditions that we create for first year sense of belonging for first year students?
So I think it goes back to creating culture change in institutions. So my research has shown that creating more sort of validating research in me and my colleagues, creating more validating, sort of proactive, aligned, seamless cultures of support for students through training of educators, hiring practices, and other efforts to kind of switch it up from business as usual to a campus. Another approach to student support can be an effective way of supporting student belonging and creating sustainable conditions for belonging in that first year. But culture change takes time, effort, intentionality, and frankly, it's hard. So leveraging evidence-based practices like professional learning communities that are shown to promote culture change in institutions is going to be key, as well as buy-in from university leadership. And why I say culture change is because it's one of the more durable ways of creating conditions that are sustainable, that support belonging for all, rather than strictly relying on programs and interventions that serve, handfuls of students alone. Not to say that those aren't important, they do important work. I have done work around the role of programs and interventions and supporting belonging myself, but I get to the question of sustainable conditions for first year experiences in supporting belonging, particularly at scale at the institution that serve great numbers of students or larger numbers of students than specific programs can. I think that culture change is one of the promising directions to go.
I'll add to the discussion that how belonging also is a process, and feeling the belonging to university can take a bit of time. And when we think of first year students, they are getting to that. And sometimes it's difficult for them, depending on the stage we ask them about if they feel a sense of belonging to uni. It's difficult to them to realize that because the context that we've studied them usually are very large universities. But what is easier for them is to get a sense of feeling belonging to the class and to their cohorts. And this is when I'm coming back how important are the classroom experiences and how the important role that academic staff in our context is lecturers, but also tutors that have much more a closer, a smaller group relationship with the students can make those feelings and can create this safe space and this inclusion and feeling comfortable that can lead to feeling a sense of belonging. In coming back what Dr. Chinaza mentioned, how important is the orientation? I think also that plays a role in the classrooms. As academics, we need to set very clear expectations about what is happening in the classroom, what students can expect from us in terms of time, and when they can ask questions, how they can reach to us and ask questions. We're very clear to that. We're very clear what we expect from them in the classrooms in terms of contribution, participation, and how that we can facilitate that. I think that's really, really important. And what type of activities we're going to do, how important is in our classrooms to interact with other students and why that is important. I think very early on, setting those expectations can definitely help to students feeling a much more comfortable, feeling the transition as well. They're adjusting to university, but also comfortable in the classes. And I think one last thing, and I know it's very difficult, it's been difficult for me as well, but trying to learn students' names. We've known in our research how this small thing can really make a difference, how students feel included, they notice in the classroom. And I know it's hard and depends on the context and how large the classes are and all of that, but trying to make that intention also helps the students create in the small scale, then we can extrapolate it to the university.
Wait, Jaquin. This can feel like torture, I'm sure, for there to be this wonderful conversation going on, and you just have to watch. You can't say anything. So, Professor Thomas, Liz, is there anything you want to add to this particular question or our conversation? And then Jaquin, take us right on across the field with the next question.
Thank you. I think one of the things we learned was about starting early. So not just when they arrive, but before they come. So we did some work pre-entry. And I think what we found with that was we wanted to make it academically relevant. So quite often there are central units that reach out to students, but actually they want to connect with their academic department and with their peers that they're going to be studying with. So that's one of the things that I think we could add to the discussion. But I also strongly agree we need to think about the institutional culture and the institutional processes. And that's why we started looking at the environment, the enabling environment that allows us to move from effective interventions to rolling them out throughout the whole campus or throughout the whole institution, wherever it's located. And that's really challenging stuff, but it's really important if this stuff's going to be sustainable. But it's not just about the good educators doing it. It's about the whole institution really taking on board those values and embedding it into their processes and the ways that they are and the ways that they interact and what's expected of staff and students.
Wow, such a really good discussion. I appreciate all of you's like your research and what you add to the discussion. I've been trying to find my digital reactions this entire time to just continue to put hearts in class, but because I cannot find them, I'm just going to do it here for you because it's such a good discussion. Next question is, the evidence is also crystal clear that not all students experience belonging equitably, but issues of equity are geographically bound. And we all know that we label these students as marginalized, disadvantaged, underrepresented, or as Chinaza said earlier, at risk. So, Claudia, this is a two-part question, and then we'll open it to others. In your context, who are we talking about? And what do we know about their belonging needs in the first year?
Great, thank you for that question. I think as many other contexts, Australia is having a lot of public policies around increasing access to students from different backgrounds to university. And usually those students refer to equity groups that usually are students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, first generation students, students with low ambition scores that can enter perhaps very selective universities, but also can be students from Aboriginal or Indigenous backgrounds as well. And something that also appear in our research is also increasingly students who identify themselves as having a disability and are accessing as well institutions. And again, I want to say here that the context that I work on is usually campus-based, very large university, but as Dr. Terra mentioned before, there's also a lot of heterogeneity around institutions in Australia. So for other institutions as well, these groups might be mature students, so students that are returning to university that also can be perhaps difficult for them to develop and have other needs as well of belonging. So that's just give a bit of a context of that. And in terms of the needs, so we know of our research that sometimes this group of students find it difficult to develop a sense of belonging to their university. And most likely, they say that it's difficult to find a sense of place among other group of students, feel represented as well among the students and among the staff at the university. Sometimes that also can be difficult to find others like me in that sense, or like them. And that can be very difficult in a very large university like that we have studied, but also in the classroom environments, they also can find difficult to participate in class, contribute, express their opinions, feel comfortable to do that. So I think that's also things that we found. And when we think of the needs of these students, I think that's very similar to perhaps all the students, but these students really need to feel safe in their space, feel respected, included, that they can be themselves, they can say things that perhaps they can disagree with that, and of course supported in the classes. And this, of course, happen with supportive, available, and approachable academic staff, but also as we talk about extracurricular activities and areas at support services at the university and other non-perhaps academic staff that also plays an important role. But what I want to stress here is that I think something that also was mentioned before, how important is to think of belonging for all the students. And not only for this particular group, but for all the students. So all the students in classes can feel included, safe, comfortable to express and to learn. The more they feel comfortable, the more they can interact, and then the more they can learn. So of course we want that. And with that, I'm thinking how important is using tools that we have available to do that. For example, the university design of learning, which aims to create those, think of strategies, thinking of all the students with different needs. Because as we've realized, many students have different needs, and sometimes not all of them self-identify with any of the groups before that I mentioned, but they might also have other issues as well. Disability comes as well, mental health issues and all of that. So I think it's very important to have those in place. And as I said, they have these extracurricular activities, groups, supportive areas, like a scholarship, like disability services particular. That seems to be very important for these students. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. And I see that people are using the chat. So again, feel free if you have any comments, please do that. And as you said, representation does matter, not only amongst your peers, but students want to see themselves in front of the classroom and, professors, and also within the curriculum. We want to study things or people that look like us, sound like us, and do work that we are interested in. Dr. Chinaza, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, thank you very much. As much as the policy, you see, two things here. The policy for me can be a double-edged sword. It can actually help to promote such things, and it can actually help to destroy such things if caution is not taken. As much as the policy is a viable tool there, and then it's helpful, I also want to emphasize that the place of the lecturers also come into play. For example, one of the things I always want to do or say to my students is, if you dare laugh at your colleague or your peer while I'm in class, it's as good as you've committed a serious, a grievous offense. I always say to my students, you can laugh at me, you can poke fun at me, do whatever you like, no offense. But when you do that against your peer in my class, it's a grievous offense. The reason is it has a way of destroying their self-esteem. It has a way of pulling them down. Also, sometimes students always want to have their cliques. That's the idea, or the truth. They want to have cliques and so on. And coming in with, okay, this person looks like me, and then they go towards that, tilt towards that person. And before you know it, they form cliques. These are people who speak the same language. These are people who do the same kind of things. However, it's a university, it's a community. It's a place, a space that prepared them for the outside world. And in the outside world, there they'll meet different people. So one of the things I feel that a lecturer can do in the sense of, in this case, is to ensure, for example, where they have to do their groupings, if it has to be group work, ensure that different people or different groups are represented there. For example, we have in our own context, we could have the case of the historically marginalized or historically disadvantaged group of people based on where they are located. And these are probably more of the rural dwellers compared to the urban. But then if you want learning to take place in that kind of space, there's need to find a way of pairing them together in the same group. They learn from one another in that space. And so when they go outside to the outside world, even after a university program, they are able to still communicate with the outside world as though they met the same people, as though with the kind of relationship they had while in the university. So I feel the lecturer has got a role to play there in his or her own capacity to find a way of making sure that they interact with different groups and not just section themselves or I'm trying to get the right word now, or find a way of creating a clique and remain in that clique, because you can have that. Even in our own context, we can have that where people just feel like these are people who speak my kind of language, my kind of skin color, and I should stick to them, and we just continue to flow like that. No, it's not. It's for me. It's not. That's not life. That's not how the world is designed. It should be a place where different people interact with different with one another and do things. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you made a really good point, is that students, and not just students, we all do it, gravitate towards people who look like us, who speak our same language, eat the same, eat food that we enjoy or the sport that we like. But one thing I learned from Dr. Strayhorn is that, although we want diversity on campus and we want students to blend and interact with each other. It has to be meaningful engagement. We have to do our part to create conditions because, again, sense of belonging is a feeling. It can't be forced. We can't just put everyone in one room and hope they get along. We have to create meaningful engagement for our students. Dr. Kitchen, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think the how matters when thinking about supporting students belonging equitably. So, to kind of echo a little bit about what I was saying earlier, just like taking that asset-based, affirming approach to support matters, recognizing on the part of educators that everyone has valuable assets and experiences and strengths that can contribute to their educational experience and success in college, recognizing that students experiencing challenging or having challenging experiences maybe aren't at risk so much as they are at promise, which is a term I've been using more in my work that kind of shifts that language a bit. They hold promise and potential for success if only the support that the educators are providing is adjusted and tailored appropriately to their needs. And really putting the onus on educators and institutions to learn about, discover, and then in turn leverage those unique set of assets and strengths and experiences is really going to be key for supporting students feeling like they belong and can be successful in college and to do so in a way that is equitable.
So much of what you all are saying converges on some of the general conclusions that come out of the body of work around sense of belonging for students, especially for those in the first year. And one of those is that we're talking about, sustainable kinds of conditions. We're talking about purposeful connections or meaningful engagement, which makes very clear that contrary to what it sort of registers with people as first, sense of belonging is much more than just a feeling or more than Skittles and rainbows. It's more than pep rallies. It's more than, everyone getting in the quad and having a good time. It's more than t-shirts and bumper stickers, although those do matter. I mean, it's important for students to feel special, to have fun, to feel that they're a part of something. And one way that we start to pick up cues that we are a part of something is based on the paraphernalia, the kind of things we wear, the kind of things we don. But it's not that only. It takes much more. So, really excited about this question. This is for everyone, including Professor Thomas. If we together were baking a belonging cake, and for me, it'd be a cupcake, but that's fine. A belonging cake altogether. What 2 or 3 ingredients would you add to our secret sauce for success that will ensure first year students will have a tasty experience that will bring them back year after year? So you only get 2 or 3 ingredients. Together, we'll bake the cake. And I'm going to kick us off with you, Dr. Claudia.
Thank you. What exciting question. I think for me is what happened in classes, as I mentioned before. I think students are increasingly having access to a lot of online resources, content, material, YouTube videos. So we have to rethink what is the value of what we offer on the classroom. And in that sense, I think interesting collaborative learning experiences very early on when they are on campus. This is something that happened. They started the semester very excited and they come to all the classes to understand what is happening. And this is the time when we offer those interesting collaborative learning experiences. And when I say that, I say 2 ingredients. 1, interactions with other students. Very important to get to know. I know it's hard, and as students in our current research say sometimes it's hard for them to interact with other students. It can be awkward sometimes, and I think that's something that we need to encourage in having supporting interactions with academic staff that are approachable, available within the context, and they can provide help for the learning because this is what they want. They want to be successful at university. And although I'm really aware that this is not new, we know that these are very important ingredients for a long time for the first year experiences. in our current context, where students having increasing competing demands, part-time jobs, take decisions to go or not to go to university, I think what we offer on campus and on classes has to be very important. Thank you.
Awesome. We're baking a dynamic cake. Professor Chinaza?
I should have said, you should have called me first. Now, maybe I could just disguise to say, oh, Claudia has answered all the questions. She has said everything I wanted to say. Okay, just kidding anyway. Interesting question. And I hope after now we'll all eat the cake, we'll share the cake and have a piece of it. Okay, now for me, first of all, make learning fun. It's always a focus most times with maybe preschool to so let learning be fun for the preschool learners and so on. But I think even at higher level as well, university students sometimes, if you analyze them very well, you find out that students are always students, whether they are at university or they are in secondary school or in primary school. You will always see the element of being a student. So you see an adult who you say, oh, this is an adult. Some of my students are principals. Okay, but then I find that whether they are principals or schools, when they come to my classroom, they are students. And I see those traits of being a student in some of them. So I feel make learning fun. That's one of the things I would contribute to this kind of cake. And then I'll say discipline as well. Discipline in the sense that set ground rules. Let's have ground rules from the outside, from the first contact. Let's set ground rules. So one of the things I always want to do for my first class is possibly tell them what to expect in the course, and then ask them what do they expect as well. Probably they have not mentioned that they think we should include. That's way, they have a way of contributing. It's like they have that sense of I've contributed to what's going to happen in this course or whatever it is. And then from there, tell them, okay, these are the ground rules. Sometimes also allow them contribute to the ground rules. So what do you think we should have here as ground rules? If you do this, will it be right or wrong? So we all know from the beginning, this is right, this is wrong. And whoever defaults at that point, we know that, okay, I defaulted, I should be penalized. And when I'm penalized, I should take it that way. And then we also have, I also talk about motivation. That's another contribution to the cake. Find ways of motivating students. It's not just about giving gifts. It could just be words of expression, just saying the right word at certain times. So one of the things I like to do is put myself sometimes in the shoes of the students. If I were to be in the position of this student, what would I be doing at this point? How would I see life? It's overwhelming. I've got family issues. I've got a work issue here and there, all calling for my attention. Some of them have got children. I once had students who put to bed during the course of our course, and maybe the colleagues were expecting me to do otherwise, and it was quite interesting. I told, oh, okay, for that case, you failed to submit. I think the student failed to submit my assignment or so, but I had to just turn into a playful thing to say, oh, you must call your baby by the name of the course, and they all laughed over it. And I had a little token to give to the baby. I sent it across, and I discovered that the student was forthcoming, and the members of the group were forthcoming. So I feel let's find a way of motivating them in any way we can. Sometimes it could just be giving them true life story or telling them what to expect after school. It has a way of getting them closer to us. We may not even know, but we just share our experiences in class. But before you know it, students come to your door knocking. They want to hear you say something to them when they are going through certain challenges. And I've seen such happen several times. So being a good guide to them would really go a long way. All right. I think I've said a mouthful. Thank you.
Wonderful mouthful, this wonderful cake that we're baking together. Dr. Kitchen, what would you add?
I think one of the most important ingredients from what I've learned from my research is really a mind shift or a shift in mindset on the part of educators and institutions that supporting belonging is a long-term investment and commitment, one that is developmental, that students will have peaks and valleys in their belonging over time, and ensuring that students have access to proactive, validating, and affirming support as they navigate those peaks and valleys over time is really going to support the development and maintenance of a sense of belonging that ultimately contributes to retention and success in college. So it's not a one and done deal. I think it was said earlier, something about there not really being a silver bullet intervention that's just going to solve all our problems, and I agree with that. I think that it's an ongoing process, and to shift one's mindsets away from what is just finding just the one magical thing that's going to just solve all of our issues with promoting sense of belonging is a meaningful way to move the needle in terms of promoting belonging, rather than looking at something that's going to just last forever. Think about it as a developmental process, an ongoing thing, and continue to do the work over time to promote belonging and maintain it.
Wonderful. Mindset and culture, Professor Thomas, you have the honors.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think I come back to some of the earlier points that it's about the academic experience, that's where students want to engage. And so we should work with where they are. So bringing things into their learning space. And I think we have to make it explicitly relevant. So when we do things that we think will be fun, but they don't have an academic purpose, quite a lot of the students that we're interested in opt out because they have other things that they think are important. So we need to make it fun through the learning rather than just something that we think will be interesting to them. And we have to make it worth their while to attend. Certainly the students I'm working with are constantly making decisions about whether they can spend the money to travel or spend the time to attend. So we have to make it really worthwhile for them. I think we do have to make it a safe space where they can learn and they can feel that they can be who they are. The kind of risk of belonging is that some people are excluded or feel alienated. So we really have to make sure that we're addressing that and not reinforcing this kind of them and us idea. And I think underpinning that is the idea that we've also talked about, that staff are really important to this. I mean, there's a point in the chat that it's both academic and professional staff, and it's really important. It's clearly not just the teaching staff, although they're often the ones which they have a lot of contact with or may feel quite alienated from if they're not being given sufficient time. One of the things we did in our #IBelong project was storytelling, by which I mean exposing our own weaknesses or challenges and helping to show that we weren't all perfect and we haven't always felt like we belong and we haven't always been successful, to really kind of break down some of those barriers and help make us all a bit more human. And I think maybe that's part of it as well, about relationship building. So there's a few more ingredients to chuck into your cake, but I'm not sure. I think there's probably lots more that we need to add in.
And of course, if we had all of the wisdom represented by our attendees, we would have an even larger, fuller, tastier cake. But like all good things, whether you're baking a cake or a wonderful webinar, all good things must come to an end. And so we're getting toward the end of our time together. And Jaquin, I don't know if you've had time to read the question in the chat and you want to raise that for our panelists. If not, I can summarize it. I can tell from his eyes he's reading. So what that question says from our colleague is essentially, and Professor Thomas, you brought this up, that it is a combination of both what students do in the classroom and what happens to them outside the classroom. This particular comment speaks to the fact that, and we've all seen this, where students believe that our institutions are way more connected than they actually are. And they think that if they tell their lecturer something in class, that the lecturer has a channel, maybe we're all in some massive group chat. And therefore, when they walk over to student services is clearly aware because I told my lecturer. Or, when they make their way over to financial aid or the counseling office, these folks are fully informed because they told someone else in the enterprise. And I can tell from the smiles on the screen that that's not true across many of our contexts. So the question becomes, how can we join this up a bit more and bring the academic student and professional services teams together. And I don't know if this represents the kind of culture change you're talking about, Dr. Kitchen, but we'll start with you and move around, and then we'll close out the session. Dr. Kitchen?
And I think you raise an interesting point about sort of the channels of communication. I think that there are things in existence that can be effective tools that open up those kinds of channels for communication. So for instance, in some of the research work I've done around culture change and supporting student success, some institutions use like e-systems, e-portfolios, advising system, things like that, where students' needs and communications that they've had with advisors or staff or faculty can be documented and shared amongst people in different sectors of the university. And so that's helpful for those can be helpful practices in terms of helping students feel like their success matters and that they belong for a variety of reasons. But one of the most common ones that I hear is like, well, next time I go from this lecturer that I express this need to, and I'm going to financial aid, I'm not having to repeat the whole story all over again to the financial aid of the issue that I just had to explain to my lecturer, because the lecturer documented some notes in this e-system, and that financial aid person was able to see those notes and then kind of come at their approach to support from at least a somewhat informed perspective, and that helps students feel like they belong and that their success matters to the broader university context. So I think there are some tools in place that can be leveraged at universities already. I think just helping educators or getting educators on board is across different sectors, faculty member in particular, getting them all kind of on board to make documentations of their discussions with students and expressions of their needs will be really key.
Anyone else want to chime in on this question? What we can do to sort of bring the academic and professional student services together a bit better?
Well, I think maybe we need to just change the mindset a little bit. So we start by assuming we shouldn't share information. And I understand where that comes from. But I think students do assume that we are sharing it. And we perhaps need to be looking at from that point of view rather than always prioritizing the safeguarding of information. And I'm not trying to suggest that we kind of play loose with people's personal and private information, but that we do need to think about the systems that facilitate sharing rather than, I think we tend to be overprotective and say, oh, we only tell people if they need to know. But students have often shared it with us on that expectation, and we perhaps need to flip it around to how we make that happen rather than how we keep everything secret.
Can I just come in here? If you would allow me come in. Okay. I want to state here that the way we present ourselves in our class also matters. For example, if I walk into the class and I present myself like a sage, I know everything, and I assume that I make my students see me from that context, and definitely it's assumed that he knows everything. Immediately, one is either I'm shutting the doors for my students to access me, or even maybe you just believe whatever they say to me will be able to go viral as they expect, being that I'm a sage, I'm all in all. So one of the things I say to my students, I try to make them realize that no, I don't know everything. And I jokingly say to them, if I know everything, I won't be on the surface of the earth. I'm still learning certain things too. So that's just a way of making it a little bit easy for them to approach and then access me when necessary. So I feel that's one of the things we can do. Another thing is we can't overemphasize the place of orientation. I like what's on the chart there. It's something that is continuous. But it shouldn't be a once-off thing like we do in some of our institutions. Okay, first years, they just do 1 week orientation or 1 day orientation, and that's all. No, it should be a continuous thing. We just must explore various ways. If it's to have a video somewhere, and encourage students from time to time to watch such videos and tell them, okay, this is what you should expect, this is what you should do in such situation. Find a way of conscientizing them over and over again. We also, as academics or our staff members, sometimes we assume certain things, and the world of teaching, you're not allowed to assume. but we assume a lot of things that these are maybe mature learners, they should mature students, they should know better. This we don't know where they are coming from. We don't know what's happening in their lives, so we can't really tell. But we just assume and make our conclusion like that. So I feel that if it's possible to have a video that would continuously serve as a reminder to them, and most importantly for me anyway, make ourselves as staff members, when I say staff members, I mean both academic and non-academic, accessible, such that they can always approach us. And where we can't give them relevant answers to their question, we can actually refer them to someone who may be able to help them, or refer them to someone who knows someone who can actually help them. For me, the most important thing is, at the end of the day, the problem or the challenge is solved. So it's presenting ourselves the right way, making ourselves accessible, and then giving them continuous orientation where and when possible. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you all very much for everything that you've contributed to this conversation, and to everyone who's using the chat to bring up something that I know Dr. Kitchen put in the chat, is that in his research, faculty talk about not being a sage on a stage, but a guide on the side, something that I have heard too out there that just sort of represents the sentiments of what you're talking about, Professor Chinaza. So in our final minutes, Jaquin, we certainly had objectives in mind when designing and developing this webinar. What are one or two things you hope people who are in the live audience or who will watch the recording will take from today's webinar?
Several things. I know one is that sense of belonging is a feeling, and it cannot be fabricated. It cannot be forced. And there are many things that we can do to foster a sense of belonging. One is paying attention to what we do in the classroom. Creating mentorship programs. And something that Dr. Kitchen said was, we have to create validating and affirming spaces. And one thing we have to do, if we don't have affirming spaces, is do the hard work to shift and pivot to create those spaces. And lastly, to bake this cake, because it's smelling good, I know it will taste good. But if students do not trust us, then nothing that we do will ever work. So I think we have to declare our intentions, signal our behaviors, and commit to what we promised them.
And with that, this concludes today's webinar, A Global Perspective, Sense of Belonging in the First Year Experience. I, on behalf of our team here at Do Good Work, want to thank all of our panelists and speakers. Certainly want to thank those in the listening audience, those who registered for the event. We will send out the link to our YouTube channel where you can watch this webinar. We encourage faculty to use it in your courses. For those who are administrators, that this is a great way to spend time with your staff, whether you work in academic affairs or student and professional services. Stay tuned for more. There are many more webinars to come your way. Until then, we'll bid you farewell. Have a great day, evening, or night, depending on where you are. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.